Welcome back to Meet Me at the Grizz, a podcast about scouting, summer camp, and the experiences that shape scouts, leaders, and the units at Rotary Scout Reservation and beyond. I'm your host, Ken Clough, scouter, camp volunteer, and storyteller. This podcast exists to do a few simple things: to help units better understand the value of Scout Summer Camp, to share real experiences from scouts, leaders, and volunteers, and to make the path to camp feel possible, no matter where a troop is starting from. Today's episode comes out of a recent troop visit, one that stayed with me long after I packed up my notes, shook hands, and started the drive home. And as is often the case, the most meaningful part of the night wasn't my presentation. It was what happened when I stopped talking. A quick word of gratitude. Before I go any further, I want to say this clearly. I was very impressed by this troop, by the scouts who were confident enough to speak up and share their experiences, by the leaders who were engaged, thoughtful, and clearly invested in doing this well. And I was impressed by the committee members and parents who were present, listening and supportive. You could tell right away that this was a troop where people respect one another, and that matters. Because strong scouting experiences don't come from schedules or paperwork alone. They come from people who care enough to stay involved. Driving home with a head full of ideas. I had been invited to visit this troop to talk about summer camp. On paper, it was a pretty standard visit, talking about opportunities at camp, encouraging scouts to attend, answering questions, meeting leaders and committee members. But the moment that stayed with me didn't come from anything I said. It came from what happened when the floor opened up. As I was driving home later that night, I realized I hadn't just visited a troop meeting. I had stepped into a room full of stories and a strong sense of community. A room full of camp stories. When the scouts were asked about summer camp, hands went up immediately, and what followed wasn't one or two rehearsed answers. Nearly every scout in the room had something they wanted to share. They talked about merit badges they were proud of earning, program areas they kept going back to, activities they didn't expect to enjoy but did, moments that challenged them, and moments that made them laugh. What struck me wasn't what they talked about. It was how natural the stories came. No hesitation, no awkward silence, no looking around to see who would go first. Summer camp was something they owned, and the stories ran the gamut. Some scouts loved advancement. Others talked about friendships. Some focused on specific program areas. Others remembered quiet moments, early mornings, late nights, or shared meals. Every scout had a different answer, and that's important because it reminds us that summer camp isn't one single experience. It's dozens, sometimes hundreds of individual experiences happening at the same time inside a shared environment. What this troop taught me about community. This troop goes to summer camp every year. That wasn't something they felt they needed to justify or explain. It was simply understood. And that understanding shapes everything. It shapes how scouts talk about scouting, how leaders plan the year, and how parents understand the program. For this unit, summer camp isn't an extra. It's one of the places where their troop community is strengthened. The scouts were comfortable speaking. The leaders were confident without hovering. And the adults were engaged without over-involvement. This felt like a troop where people show up, not just physically, but wanting to help, and that doesn't happen by accident. The role of leaders and parents. Summer camp doesn't just happen because scouts want it. It happens because adults make it possible. Leaders plan. Committee members problem solve. Parents commit time, energy, and trust. What I saw with this troop was alignment. Leaders believed in the value of camp. Parents understood why it mattered. Scouts felt supported, not pressured, to participate. And when adults show confidence in summer camp, Scouts respond with enthusiasm. When adult leaders treat camp as meaningful, Scouts experience it that way. And over time, that shared experience strengthens the entire troop community. Summer camp as a growth experience. Summer camp often gets talked about in terms of advancement. And advancement matters. Merit badges matter. Skills matter. And progress matters. But what I was reminded of during this visit is that advancement is only part of the story. For individual Scouts, summer camp builds independence, confidence, responsibilities, social skills, and resilience. Scouts learn to manage their own schedules. They learn to speak up for themselves. They learn to try new things without the comfort of home. And they learn who they are when they're stretched. And for the troop, summer camp creates shared experience, inside jokes, common reference points, a sense of, we've been through something together. That shared experiences strengthens meetings, outings, and leadership development long after camp ends. Why some troops struggle to get to camp, and why that's often no one's fault. This is part of the conversation that needs honesty and generosity. Not every troop goes to summer camp, and the reasons are rarely simple. Yes, there are real barriers: cost, transportation, adult availability, and competing family commitments. But there's another factor that doesn't get talked about enough. That is, new leaders. Many troops today are led by adults who are new to scouting. They didn't grow up going to summer camp. They don't have camp stories of their own. They may not yet understand what camp offers beyond merit badges or a week away. From the outside, summer camp can look like an expensive trip, a logistical challenge, or something optional rather than essential. That's not failure. That's simply unfamiliar territory. And unfamiliar territory calls for guidance, not pressure. Asking questions makes a difference. One of the most important messages I try to share is this: you don't have to figure summer camp out alone. Camps, councils, other troops, and experienced volunteers. There are people who want to help units get to camp and keep going back. If your troop hasn't been to camp, ask questions. Visit a camp. Talk to leaders from experienced units. Start small. Summer camp doesn't have to look the same for every troop. What matters is taking the first step. Troop community meets camp community. This is where places like Rotary Scout Reservation really matter. Camps aren't just locations on a map. They are where troop communities connect with the larger scouting community, and where traditions are formed, repeated, and passed down. At camp, troops don't just follow schedules. They bring themselves with them. They bring routines. They bring inside jokes. They bring ways of doing things that only make sense to the people who live them together. And over time, those routines turn into traditions. Traditions that Scouts look forward to all year. Traditions that older Scouts teach to younger Scouts. Traditions that quietly become part of a troop's history. I've talked about this before in the podcast because I've lived it. For my troop, one of those traditions was Dutch oven donuts. It wasn't on the program schedule. It wasn't required. It wasn't anything fancy. But every year at camp, we made them. And every year, Scouts expected them. It became our thing. New Scouts learned about it from older Scouts before they ever went to camp. Returning Scouts talked about it like it was inevitable. Adults planned around it without even needing to say it out loud. That's how traditions work. They don't get announced. They don't get written down. They just continue. And those traditions matter because camp is full of firsts. First time away from home. First time managing your own schedule. And first time being truly independent. Traditions provide an anchor. They say, "You belong here. This is part of your troop's story." At the same time, camp connects those troop traditions to something bigger. Scouts see other troops with their own traditions. They hear stories from units they've never met before. They start to understand that while their troop is unique, they're also part of a much larger scouting community. That's why troops come back year after year. Not just for the merit badges, not just for the program areas. They come back because camp becomes part of the rhythm of their scouting life. And while this podcast focuses on Rotary Scout Reservation, the lessons apply everywhere. Any camp, any council, any unit willing to invest in the experience. Rotary is where we see these connections come to life. But the impact extends far beyond one place, because it lives on in our memories, traditions, and stories long after camp ends. To the troops who go every year, tell your story. This is where experienced troops can help others the most. Your story matters. Not the polished version, but the real one. Talk about what it takes to get to camp, how you fund it, how you support new families, what traditions keeps your scouts coming back. Other units need to hear that success doesn't come without effort. They also need to hear that the effort is worth it. Peer stories build understanding faster than any presentation ever could. Why this podcast exists. This episode sits right at the heart of Meet Me at the Grizz. It's about sharing experiences, lowering barriers, helping units see what's possible. Summer camp builds scouts, but it also builds troop communities. And when troop communities are strong, scouting is strong. Closing reflection. Why troops come back. As I think back to that troop meeting, what stays with me isn't a schedule or a statistic. It's the sound of scouts talking comfortably and confidently about experiences that matter to them. And beneath those stories was something deeper. Shared memories, inside jokes, and traditions that didn't need explaining. Those are the things that bring troops back year after year. Not because they're required, but because they're remembered. Summer camp becomes part of a troop story, and once that happens, it's hard to imagine scouting without it. If your troop goes to camp every year, thank you. If your troop is trying to figure out summer camp, keep asking questions. And if you're new to scouting, stay curious. And if you have a camp tradition or story to share, I hope you'll tell it, because someone else's troop may be waiting to hear it. Until next time, thanks for spending time with me today at Meet Me at the Grizz. If this episode resonated with you, consider sharing it with a leader, a parent, or committee member who's thinking about summer camp. And you can find more episodes, resources, and stories at meetmeatthegrizz.com. So until next time, I'm Ken Clough, and I'll see you at summer camp.